All right, MOvember, day 13. And I'm going to pull something from a very old book. This is a book called How to Stop Worrying and Start Living by Dale Carnegie. And I have a mini pet belief that there was this window of time that Bill Wilson wrote the big book. Dale Carnegie was writing around that sort of period. Florence Shovel Shinn was writing around that period, The Game of Life and How to Play It. And Neville Goddard was sort of speaking, all metaphysical Christians in their own right and writing. And so it's always hard to know where to pull into information on people, but this is sort of part 4 or 7 ways to peace and happiness. It's chapter 16, find yourself and be yourself. Remember, there is no one else on earth like you. So this is by Dale Carnegie, and I hope you enjoy it. I have a letter from Miss Edith Alfred from Mount Airy, North Carolina. As a child, I was extremely sensitive and shy. She says in her letter, I was always overweight and my cheeks made me look even fatter than I was. I had an old-fashioned mother who thought it was foolish to make clothes look pretty. She always said, wide will wear while narrow will tear. And she dressed me accordingly. I never went to parties, never had any fun. And when I went to school, I never joined the other children in outside activities, not even athletics. I was morbidly shy. I felt I was different from everybody else and entirely undesirable. When I grew up, I married a man who was several years my senior, but I didn't change. My in-laws were a poised and self-confident family. They were everything I should have been, but simply was not. I tried my best to be like them, but I couldn't. Every attempt they made to draw me out of myself only drove me further into my shell. I became nervous and irritable. I avoided all friends. I got so bad I even dreaded the sound of the doorbell ringing. I was a failure. I knew it, and I was afraid my husband would find it out. So whenever we were in public, I tried to be gay and overacted my part. I knew I overacted, and I would be miserable for days afterwards. At last, I became so unhappy that I could see no point in prolonging my existence. I began to think of suicide. What happened to change my unhappy woman's life? Just a chance remark. A chance remark, Miss Alred continued, transformed my whole life. My mother-in-law was talking one day of how she brought her children up, and she said, no matter what happened, I always insisted on their being themselves, on being themselves. That remark is what did it. In trying to fit myself into a pattern to which I did not conform, I changed overnight. I started being myself. I tried to make a study of my own personality, tried to find out what I was. I studied my strong points. I learned all I could about colours and styles. I dressed in a way that I felt was becoming to me. I reached out to make friends. I joined an organisation, a small one at first, and was petrified with fright when they put me on a program. But each time I spoke, I gained a little courage. It took a long while, but today I have more happiness than I ever dreamed possible. In rearing my own children, I've always taught them the lesson I had to learn from such bitter experience. No matter what happens, always be yourself. This problem of being willing to be yourself is as old as history, says Dr. James Gordon Gilkey, and as universal as human life. This problem of being unwilling to be yourself is the hidden spring behind many neuroses and psychoses and complexes. Angela Patry has written 13 books and thousands of syndicated newspaper articles on the subject of child training, and he says nobody is so miserable as he who longs to be somebody or something other than the person he is in body and mind. This craving is to be something you are not is especially rampant in Hollywood. Sam Wood, one of Hollywood's best-known directors, says the greatest heartache he has with aspiring young actors is exactly this problem, to make them be themselves. They all want to be second-rate Lana Turners or third-rate Clark Gables. The public has already had that flavour. Sam Wood keeps telling them now it wants something else. Before he started directing such pictures as Goodbye Mr. Chips or For Whom the Bell Tolls, Sam Wood spent years in the real estate business developing sales personalities. He declares that the same principles apply in the business world as in the world of moving pictures. You won't get anywhere playing the ape. You can't be a parrot. Experience has taught me, says Sam Wood, that it is safest to drop as quickly as possible people who pretend to be what they aren't. I recently asked Paul Boynton, employment director for the Saucony vacuum oil company, what is the biggest mistake people make in applying for jobs. He ought to know. He has interviewed more than 60,000 job seekers, and he has written a book entitled 6 Ways to Get a Job. He replied, the biggest mistake people make in applying for jobs is to not be themselves. Instead of taking their hair down and being completely frank, they often give you the answers that they want. But it doesn't work, because nobody wants a phony. Nobody ever wants a counterfeit coin. A certain daughter of a streetcar conductor had to learn that lesson the hard way. She longed to be a singer, but her face was her misfortune. She had a large mouth and protruding buck teeth. When she first sang in public in the New Jersey nightclub, she tried to pull down her upper lip and cover her teeth. She tried to act glamorous. The result? She made herself ridiculous. She was headed for failure. However, there was a man in the nightclub who heard the girl sing and thought she had talent. See here, he said, bluntly. I have been watching your performance and I know what it is you're trying to hide. You're ashamed of your teeth. The girl was embarrassed and the man continued, what of it? Is there any particular crime in having buck teeth? Don't try to hide them. Open your mouth and the audience will love you when they see you're not ashamed. Besides, he said shrewdly, those teeth you're trying to hide may make you a fortune. Cass Daly took this advice and forgot about her teeth. From that time on, she thought only about her audience. She opened her mouth wide and sang with such gusto and enjoyment that she became a top star in movies and radio. Other comedians are now trying to copy her. The renowned William James was speaking of men who had never found themselves when he declared that the average man develops only 10% of his latent mental abilities. Compared to what we ought to be, he wrote, we are only half awake. We are making use of only a small part of our physical and mental resources. Stating the thing broadly, the human individual thus lives far within his limits. He possesses powers of various sorts that he habitually fails to use. You and I have such abilities, so let's not waste a second worrying because we are not like other people. You are something new in this world. Never before, since the beginning of time, has there ever been anyone exactly like you, and never again throughout all of the ages will there ever be anybody exactly like you again. The new science of genetics informs us that you are what you are largely as a result of 24 chromosomes contributed by your father, 24 chromosomes contributed by your mother. These 48 chromosomes comprise everything that determines what you inherit. In each chromosome, there may be, says Amran Scheinfeld, anywhere from scores to hundreds of genes, and a single gene in some cases is able to change the whole life of an individual. Truly, we are fearfully and wonderfully made. Even after your mother and father met and mated, there was only one chance in 300,000 billion that the person who is specifically you would be born. In other words, if you had 300,000 billion brothers and sisters, they might have all been different from you. Is all this guesswork? No, it is a scientific fact. If you would like to read more about it, go to your public library and borrow a book entitled You and Hereditary by Amran Scheinfeld. I can talk with conviction about this subject of being yourself because I feel deeply about it. I know what I am talking about. I know from bitter and costly experience. To illustrate, when I first came to New York from the cornfields of Missouri, I enrolled in the American Academy of Dramatic Arts. I aspired to be an actor. I had what I thought was a brilliant idea, a shortcut to success, an idea so simple, so foolproof that I couldn't understand why thousands of ambitious people hadn't already discovered it. It was this: I would study how the famous actors of the day, John Drew, Walter Hampden, and Otis Skinner, got their effects. Then I would imitate the best point of each of them and make myself into a shining, triumphant combination of all of them. How silly, how absurd I was to waste the years of my life imitating other people before it penetrated through my thick Missouri skull that I had to be myself and that I couldn't possibly be anyone else. That distressing experience ought to have taught me a lasting lesson, but it didn't, not me. I was too dumb. I had to learn it all over again. Several years later, I set out to write what I hoped would be a best book on public speaking for business men that had ever been written. I had the same foolish idea about writing this book that I had formerly had about acting. I was going to borrow the ideas of a lot of other writers and put them all in one book, a book that would have everything. So I got scores of books on public speaking and spent a year incorporating the ideas into my manuscript, but it finally dawned on me once again that I was playing the fool. This hodgepodge of other men's ideas I had written was so synthetic, so dull, that no businessman would ever plod through it. So I tossed a year's work into the wastebasket and started all over again. This time I said to myself, you've got to be Dale Carnegie. With all his faults and limitations, you can't possibly be anyone else. So I quit trying to be a combination of other men and rolled up my sleeves and did what I thought should have been done in the first place. I wrote a textbook on public speaking out of my own experience, observations and convictions as a speaker and a teacher of speaking. I learned, for all time, I hope, the lesson that Sir Walter Raleigh learned. I am not talking about Sir Walter who threw his coat in the mud for the Queen to step on. I'm talking about Sir Walter Raleigh, who was Professor of English Literature of Oxford back in 1904. I can't write a book commiserate with Shakespeare, he said, but I can write a book by me. Be yourself. Act on the sage advice of Irving Berlin gave to the late George Gershwin. When Berlin and Gershwin first met, Berlin was famous, but Gershwin was a struggling young composer working for $35 a week in Tin Pan Alley. Berlin, impressed by Gershwin's ability, offered Gershwin a job as his musical secretary at almost 3 times the salary he was getting. But don't take the job, Berlin advised. If you do, you may develop into a second-rate Berlin. But if you insist on being yourself, someday you will be a first-rate Gershwin. Gershwin heeded the warning, slowly transformed himself into one of the significant American composers of his generation. Charlie Chaplin, Will Rogers, Mary, Margaret McBride, Gene Autry, and millions of others had to learn a lesson I'm trying to hammer home in this chapter. They had to learn the hard way, just as I did. When Charlie Chaplin first started making films, the director of the pictures insisted on Chaplin's imitating a popular German comedian of the day. Charlie Chaplin got nowhere until he acted himself. Bob Hope had a similar experience, spent years in a singing and dancing act, and got nowhere until he began to wisecrack and be himself. Will Rogers twirled a rope in vaudeville for years without saying a word. He got nowhere until he discovered his unique gift for humour and began to talk as he twirled the rope. When Mary Margaret McBride first went on the air, she tried to be an Irish comedian and failed. When she tried to just be what she was, a plain country girl from Missouri, she became one of the most popular radio stars in New York. When Gene Autry tried to get rid of his Texas accent and dressed like city boys and claimed he was from New York, people merely laughed behind his back. But when he started twanging his banjo and singing cowboy ballads, Gene Autry started out on a career that made him the world's most popular cowboy, both in pictures and on radio. You are something new in the world. Be glad of it. Make the most of what nature gave you. In the last analysis, all art is autobiographical. You can sing only what you are. You can paint only what you are. You must be what your experiences, your environment, and your heredity have made you. For better or for worse, you must cultivate your own little garden. For better or for worse, you must play your own little instrument in the orchestra of life. As Emerson said in his essay on self-reliance, there is a time in every man's education when he arrives at the conviction that envy is ignorance, that imitation is suicide, and that he must take himself for better or for worse as his portion. And though the wide universe is full of good, no kernel of nourishing corn can come to him but through the toil bestowed on that plot of ground which is given to him to till. The power which resides in him is new in nature, and none but he knows what that is which he can do, nor does he know until he has tried. That is the way Emerson said it, but here is the way a poet, the late Douglas Mallock, said it. If you can't be a pine on top of the hill, be a scrub in the valley, but be the best that'll scrub by the side of the rill. Be a bush if you can't be a tree. If you can't be a bush, be a bit of grass and some highway happier make. And if you can't be a muskie, then just be a bass, but the liveliest bass in the lake. We can't all be captains, we've got to be crew. There's something for all of us here. There's big work to do and there's lesser to do, and the task we must do is the near. If you can't be a highway, then just be a trail, and if you can't be the sun, be a star. It isn't by the size that you win or you fail. Be the best of whatever you are. So, let's not imitate others. Let's find ourselves and be ourselves. Dale Carnegie, great little books. Tonight I just wanted to throw out something just that, from my bookcase that, it sits up there. And I remember the first time I read this, I really liked this book. For 12 steppers out there, there's a lot of good old William James, St. Pierre St. Francis. There's a lot of little gems in here that I know Bill must have been informed by, and the other writers at the time. So it is MOvember. Be gentle with your heart as you move through your recovery today. Please check out my MOvember page. Pass this video on to anyone that might be dealing with worry and real difficulty being themselves. It's an oldie but a goodie, and I look forward to putting another resource out there tomorrow. Take care.